Okay, we're working on a Mustang, and we have a brake issue and a wheel bearing issue. These wheel bearings are loose. Now, here's how you can test that a little bit. It's easier to do with the wheel that's on here, but when the wheel is on here. But if you want to check your bearings to see if they're loose, grab the top and the bottom of the wheel and wiggle them. And if you have play like that, that either means the bearings are not tight enough or that they are worn out. So here we are, we've got it right here. We know we want to pack these wheel bearings. So here's how you take this apart. You remove, this is called the spindle right here, and we're going to take the nut off of the spindle. So as we take the nut off the spindle, which is what holds that whole mechanism on there, the brake drum, so that they work well. And you can see right here, this is where your wheels bolt up. Then when you wiggle it like this, so you can get a little movement out of it. And here's the back washer. Now look at this back washer. When you get ready to put this back together, it's got a small tab on it right there that sets in this groove on the spindle. So it goes on just like this when you take it back off. So we're going to clean both those parts, and then you pull on it a little bit like this and then work it back out. And here's the outer wheel bearing, which is called a tapered bearing, and you can see that it angles at a side. It's not straight across. They used to have roller bearings, and if you find some of the early 50s Chevrolets, they are flat and they have balls in them, but they've gone to these. So now we're going to take the drum off, and you can see on the back side, this is where the wheel bearing and the seal go. And they're stuck in there, so you reach up in there and pull the bearing off, and it would fit right here in the wheel. And there it is. If you can see what I'm talking about, it's right. It goes right in that spot. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can go around to the side and make sure there's nothing underneath, and put a long screwdriver down through there and catch the bearing and drive it out with a hammer. But sometimes that damages the bearing when you do that. So here's another way that you can do it, by putting the brake drum back on the spindle and then starting the nut that holds the wheel on and pulling the wheel out again, using the nut as kind of a deterrent to grab the bearing and the seal and pull them out as you're pulling the drum back off of the spindle. So here you go. You just screw it on there just a little bit, then you pull it out, jerk on it a few times. Now you do see, you can see it finally came out, and it's all ready to go. And we'll take it over now and put it in the vat and clean all the old grease up and get it ready for us to reinstall new bearings.
The best way is to get the grease out. I found the easiest way to clean these. Just get going. There you go. Video on there. That little recess there is how you get the race out. So you get your punch in there. Give it a little tap till it moves. And then hit the other side. And you'll just keep doing that until it works its way out. Like so.
Still working on the Mustang brakes, and here's another tip for you. This is called the backing plate, and this is actually what the shoes mount on. This is where the axle mounts in, and one thing you need to look at are these tabs right here to make sure that they're smooth. This is what the brake shoes ride on. First of all, when you put it back on, be sure that you put some grease on there. There's a special grease that you can buy for brakes, and it's a blue grease that we put on there, but a lot of times they get these grooves in them. See this groove right here? You want to fix that before you put the brake shoes back on, or the brake shoe will jump over that and then it's going to stick and it won't retract, and that's going to make it hang up, and then the brake shoes are going to overheat because they'll be applied all the time. So you have to do something about that in order to stop that from happening. And here in the shop, we just sand that down and then weld it back up and grind it off so that it's perfectly smooth. It's probably something you want to check out after you do that, because sometimes, like on this one, we did that and it didn't seem to hold or work very well for some reason. Now let's go on to packing the wheel bearings over here. Okay, right here we're packing the wheel bearings. This is my packer. Nobody likes but me, but I love the way that it packs the wheel bearing. Now we are at the new bearings, and they need to have grease. So what a lot of people do is they love playing with the grease, so they stick their fingers in here and they total it in and push it in around here, and then they stuff a whole bunch of grease inside the drum thinking that's going to fix it. But the reality of it is that you need enough grease to get inside the bearing right here, and that's very difficult to do. You can see that's a little bit of a lip, and you can push a lot with your finger, and eventually if you massage it enough, it'll finally fill up with grease. But that's the important part. And then you put a little bit about the outside and drop your bearing in. This device right here does this for you, and it does a much better job. You put the bearing in there like that, and then we drop this washer on it and tighten the nut up. This is kind of fun to do, really. You don't have to get your fingers all greasy. Like that. And then we got an air hose here. I use some Ford front end grease that they actually use for wheel bearings in my grease gun. You can get it on Amazon. And you put this on here like this, and you pull the trigger. And I hope you can get a picture of that grease coming out. Whether you can or you can't, I'll take it off and show you exactly how that looks. Now you see how that did? That pushed grease out all the way around that bearing on the inside and the outside. And you can see the color of that grease. It's a different color than the red wheel bearing grease that you get at someplace like Napa. This is supposed to be a better grease. I don't know if it is or not, but this is what I use because I can get a tube of it into my grease gun. So now we go with that, and you can see that pretty much does all you need to. You can take this grease and rub it around the outside. Once the race is back in there, then you can drop that in there and put the seal on it. So we're going to leave it right there for a minute, and we're going to drive one race in here and show you what that's all about. So if you will, you drive this race, and this is a tool right here that we use that matches up, and you see how it's tapered, and you can put your race inside that tool, and then he's going to drive that in there for you. Now that's the part that the bearing engages right there. So the next thing you do is you put plenty of grease in there all around your bearing on the outside like this. That's ugly, isn't it? And then you put some in here. This is where people get a little wild and crazy. They want to stick it all over up inside this drum. And I've never seen any of that grease actually do anything, but keeping it right around where the bearing race is the most important part. And then leaving it on the bearing like this and then dropping it in will get you where you need to go. Then take your finger and kind of clean that part of it off. Wipe that off on a rag. Now we're going to put the seal in there. And then we use the same tool for that, except we turn it around to use the flat side of that bearing driver instead of the tapered side. Put the seal on there like that. And he's going to drive it in the same way with the hammer. Very easy because you can bend those real easy. So make sure you're getting it started straight. You can see how he's a little crooked on the far end. So you kind of go over to that side and drive on it a little bit till you get it to straighten up. See how it's straightened up? Now you can go back and do the whole thing. Be careful with this seal because they're very easy to bend. Just go real slow and make sure it's all going in equally at the same time. You can see it's flush right there by the way he's checking it. So that's ready to go. We do exactly the same thing on the next side. We drive the race in, we put the bearing on, and then we go back over it and put it on the spindle of the car. Hey, hope this helps you out. If you're putting on brakes, this is some good information that you can use to make it a lot easier for you to work on your brakes and especially to pack your wheel bearings.